welcome to everybody here already. We're going to get started in just a couple more minutes. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started because it's 1 o'clock and hopefully we'll have more folks trickle in as things get rolling. Thank you to everybody who's joining in. And if you can do me a favor, because this is only the second time I've done this and technology is not always my friend. If you have any questions during this webinar, go ahead and pop them into the chat. That way I can see your questions as I'm going and I'll try and answer them along the way. And if I don't get to it along the way, I will answer them at the end. But it's helpful to type something in the chat because then I can see it, and also include if you're having any problems hearing me or seeing anything that I'm sharing. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Emily Davenport. I work for the University of Georgia. I work in the marine science department there for a group called ECOGIG, and ECOGIG was funded after the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in 2010 in the Gulf of Mexico, and it's my job to share with people what our researchers are doing in that area, and also just to share general ocean related things, because the ocean covers 70% of our planet, and it's super important for everyone who lives on our planet. So that is my job. I love sharing things about the ocean. So today I'm going to share with you guys how and why we explore the deep sea, which the deep sea is my favorite part of the ocean. It's anywhere that light does not make it to the water. So anything below about 200 meters is considered the start of the deep sea. And you can't swim there. So there's kind of some special ways we have to go to explore the deep sea. So I'm going to show a little bit of that with you. See if I can get my technology to cooperate. So the first thing I'm going to show is a video. I haven't done a video on one of these webinars yet, so please let me know if you can't hear it or it's being glitchy. And if a bunch of people are having problems, I'll just skip it and I'll share the link to the video with you guys so you can watch it on your own time. It's just a fun little animation. It'll just take a couple minutes. So let's give it a try. Nope, that didn't work. Come on. Let's see.
Just how deep does the ocean go? If you took the highest point on land and submerged it, you would still have more than a mile between you and the deepest point in the oceans. The oceans harbor 99% of all living space on Earth and have enough water to fill a bathtub that's 685 miles long on each side. For scale, here's a human, and here's a blue whale, the largest animal on Earth. Blue whales usually hunt at depths of around 330 feet within the well-lit zone of the ocean. Deeper down, at 700 feet, the USS Triton became the first submarine to circumnavigate the Earth in 1960. At 831 feet, we reached the deepest free dive in recorded history. Down here, the pressure is 26 times greater than at the surface, which would crush most human lungs. But whales manage it, diving to a max depth of 1,640 feet where they hunt giant squid. At 2,400 feet, we reach the danger zone for modern nuclear attack submarines. Any deeper, and the submarine's hull would implode. 2,722 feet down is where the tip of the world's tallest building, the Burj Khalifa, would reach. A little farther, at 3,280 feet, we're deep enough that sunlight can't reach us. We've now entered the midnight zone. Many animals down here can't see, like these eyeless shrimp at 7,500 feet who thrive near scalding hot underwater volcanoes. At this depth, temperatures are just a few degrees above freezing, but the waters around hydrothermal vents can heat up to 800 degrees Fahrenheit. 9,816 feet is the deepest any mammal has been recorded swimming, the Cuvier-beaked whale. But not even the Cuvier-beaked whale could explore the RMS Titanic, which rests at a staggering depth of 12,500 feet. The pressure is now 378 times greater than at the surface. Yet you can still find sea life like the fangtooth, hagfish, and Dumbo Octopus, the deepest living octopus on Earth. At 20,000 feet is the Hadal Zone, an area designated for the ocean's deepest trenches, like the Mariana Trench. If you tipped Mount Everest into the Mariana Trench, its summit would reach down to 29,029 feet. That still doesn't compare to the two deepest crewed missions in history. In 2012, director James Cameron descended to 35,756 feet for the Deep Sea Challenger mission. But Cameron didn't quite break the record, which was set by oceanographer Jacques Piccard and Lieutenant Don Walsh in 1960. Piccard and Walsh descended to the lowest point on Earth, Challenger Deep, at a record 35,797 feet below the surface. Since then, scientists have sent half a dozen unmanned submersibles to explore Challenger Deep, including Kaiko, which collected over 350 species off the seafloor between 1995 and 2003. But scientists estimate there are potentially thousands of marine species we have yet to discover. Humans have explored an estimated 5 to 10% of Earth's oceans. We've only just begun to understand the deep, dark world that flows beneath us.
Okay, so it sounds like that video worked, but just in case if you couldn't hear it or it was glitchy or you just want to watch it again, it's available at this link on YouTube. There are other videos out there as well that are great. There's a really great website that's interactive that you can scroll through to see the different animals that live in different depths of the ocean. It's very cool. Okay, so why is the deep sea important? There's just a handful of reasons. There's so many, but all of our oceans are connected. So things that happen in the deep sea influence shallower waters and vice versa. So just because you can't see it doesn't necessarily mean that we're not influencing it in some way. There has been a ton of ocean plastic that, or not ocean plastic, but plastic in general, that has made its way to the deep sea. And researchers actually think that there is more plastic waste in the deep sea than there is in the garbage patches that exist around our ocean. So we are having a huge influence on our deep sea just with our trash. A lot of our fish actually comes from the deep sea, and a lot of new discoveries have been made by exploring the deep sea. Every time we go, we turn up new animals, new medical advances, sometimes even new ecosystems. So the more we explore, the more we learn. And there's just so much out there that we don't know about the deep sea. Um, Only about 5% of our oceans have been explored in general, and about 1% of the deep sea has been explored. Um, and the reason why is because it's kind of hard to get there and it's expensive. You can't just walk out to the beach and hop on down to the deep sea with your scuba gear on. It's too dangerous for humans to go without some sort of protection. And we also need special research vessels usually to take us to a place that's deep enough, to get our submersible there. So here are a few examples of research, or just ships in general, research vessels or ships that we might use. This is the research vessel Atlantis. It's operated by Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, and it is the ship that carries the submersible Alvin, which I will share with you in a little bit. And Alvin is a special research submarine that can go a lot deeper than like Navy submarines can. This is the educational vessel Nautilus, and Nautilus is a really great group that all they do is ocean exploration for the sake of exploration and sharing it with people on the internet. And they have a great website where they stream all of their research expeditions to the public, and their whole job is just to educate people about the ocean, and they have some really cool technology that allows them to do that. And so they use this ship, and they use some pieces of equipment, not submersibles, but they use other equipment to explore the deep sea, which I'll share with you in a little bit. And then there's other vessels, like this particular ship is the Ocean Intervention. It is actually used to service oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico, but sometimes it's used by researchers as well. I was actually on this ship a couple years ago in the Gulf of Mexico, and we were exploring deep sea coral ecosystems. And this ship has a really large piece of equipment to survey oil rigs, and then also a smaller piece of equipment that we were using to look at the deep sea corals. And I'll show that with you to you guys in a minute as well. Okay, so the first way we would explore the deep sea is we can actually get inside a submarine and go to that particular place of interest. This is the Alvin, and it lives, like I said, on board the Atlantis. It's actually even got this little track you can see that they roll Alvin out of the garage on Atlantis. And then it is basically craned over the back of the ship into the water. It only carries up to 3 people. So there's the Alvin pilot, and then 2 researchers are on board. And it can travel 2.5 miles below the surface. And it's battery powered, so dives only last around 8 to 10 hours before they have to come back up to the surface because power is limited. I have not been in Alvin. However, my boss has been in Alvin many, many times, and it's my goal one day to be able to go in a submersible, which would be really cool. I'm seeing a question, what are most submarines made out of? They are made out of metal. That is, and actually some other materials as well to help make them buoyant, but mostly it's metal. I believe it's titanium because it has to withstand the pressure of the deep sea. That's one of the challenges going down to the deep sea, is that there's just so much water pushing on the submersibles that they have to be made mostly of metal, some glass to, on the windows and whatnot, but they have to be able to withstand that pressure. Okay, so let's see if I can advance my slide. So this is the Deep Sea Challenger, which is a special submersible that James Cameron, the director of the movie Titanic and other movies, used to explore the Challenger Deep, which is in the Mariana Trench, and it's the deepest known spot in the ocean at almost 7 miles deep. And like you saw from the video at the beginning, he almost made it to the bottom, not quite. Pretty darn close though. And it was just him in that submersible, which I think would be terrifying. But and then the first time anybody ever tried to make it to the deepest spot in the ocean was actually in 1960 in this submersible called the Trieste. And if you look, it looks like it's super roomy, but the part that the people were in is this sphere right here at the bottom. The rest of it was just helping it get down to the bottom and back up. That there's no room for anybody in there except for this little metal sphere. Oh, good question here coming in about why does the pressure not affect the marine biology that lives in the deep sea? These creatures have adapted to life in that pressure. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the blobfish. There's a picture of like the world's ugliest fish on the internet. If you Google the blobfish, you'll see it, and it's sad and looks like it's got a big sad nose, and he looks really unhappy because he's been pulled up to the surface. This is a fish that lives way deep down where the pressure is great. And when you put that fish back down in the deep sea, it actually looks like a normal fish. So the pressure actually pushes it to look normal. So the creatures that live in the deep sea have adapted. They have special body shapes and just the way their bodies have adapted to life, they can handle that pressure. There was actually a recent discovery last year of an amphipod, which is a relative of a crab, a teeny tiny crab relative that lives in the deep sea that has managed to make a way to extract aluminum from the mud that's in the bottom of the ocean and lines its shell with this aluminum to keep itself from being crushed by the pressure. So it makes a little coat of armor for itself so it won't be crushed under those deep sea pressures. So life finds a way to make itself work there. And then how do submarines get back to the surface? Another question. Basically, like the way the Alvin works is it's got a bunch of metal plates attached to it. And before they come back up, they drop some of the metal plates. And then it becomes buoyant enough to head back to the surface. And then also submarines do have some capability of using their, they have like propellers and stuff to help drive up and down and forward and back. But they usually do have to drop some weight in order to make their way back up to the surface. Okay, moving on. So only 4 people have been to the bottom of the deepest part of the ocean, which is again the Challenger Deep in the Mariana Trench. It's almost 7 miles below the surface of the ocean. So in 1960 was the first time, then not again until 2012. And then actually one more person last year made it to the bottom, Victor Vescovo. His goal was to get to there's 4 places in around the world that are very deep places in the ocean, and he made it to all 4 of them actually. So in contrast, 12 people have been on the moon and 561 people have been to outer space. So we've definitely explored more of space than we have of our own ocean. And that's just something that we are hoping to improve all the time with more deep sea exploration. This is another submarine that doesn't go as deep. You can see because this is a glass sphere right here. So this can only go about 3,000 feet below the surface. Again, it's battery powered, carries a couple people. This person right here, that is actually my boss who I work for at the University of Georgia, Dr. Samantha Joy, and she's down in the Gulf of Mexico. looking at a very cool feature. This is something that you would see in the deep sea, in particular the Gulf of Mexico. This is actually an underwater lake. So there are lakes on the bottom of our oceans. In certain places, this is known as a brine pool. So it's super, super salty water that comes out of the seafloor and just kind of settles on the bottom. It's so dense that it can't mix with any of the seawater around it. So it just kind of sits there in a pool and nothing really can live in it because it's too salty. But these deep sea mussels actually form kind of a reef around the brine pool, which is super cool. I'll show you another picture of that later. Oh, question about how do we protect ourselves from pressure in the ocean, and do we use that in space too? So the way we protect ourselves in the ocean is just to go down in a vehicle that is basically pressurized and is protective. So we obviously cannot go down ourselves. And I believe we're using something similar in space as well, you know, a spacecraft or a space suit, something protective. We ourselves cannot go down there. And that's one reason why we can't dive in like scuba dive into the deep sea. It would be, the pressure would just be too great. We would be crushed. And then another question, are there scanners that can scan the ocean? There definitely are vehicles that we are using that can drive around in the ocean by themselves, that are autonomous, that we kind of just put out in the ocean. We might deploy from a ship, and they would scan they might measure different things about the water. We might tell them to measure certain things, and they would drive through the ocean and measure those properties about the water. There are definitely those kinds of equipment available. They are great. They're more and more being developed every day to help us learn more about the ocean, for sure. They're not without their own problems. Technology is not always reliable. So sometimes things go wrong, but for the most part, there's a super useful tool. Do any animals eat the mussels that live around here? Yes, other animals do eat them. They're an interesting mussel because they are chemosynthetic, which, if that word sounds strange to you, I will be talking a lot more about chemosynthesis this Wednesday, actually. So for those of you who are interested in that, I have another webinar planned for Wednesday at 1. But just real briefly, chemosynthesis is a process of creating food without the presence of sunlight. So we rely on photosynthesis. Not us ourselves, but plants do photosynthesis, and then other things eat the plants, and that's what gives us all energy. We're all reliant on sunlight. Well, in the deep sea, there is no sunlight. So animals that live in the deep sea have actually adapted to using chemicals as a food source, as an energy source, instead of sunlight. And these mussels have a special bacteria that live inside of them that turn chemicals that are naturally occurring in the water into food for them. So here in the Gulf of Mexico in particular, there's lots of cold seeps, which is places where oil and gas naturally seep out of the seafloor, and other sorts of chemicals like hydrogen sulfide and things like that are seeping out of the seafloor that these bacteria then use to create food. And then the mussels eat the bacteria, the bacteria create like a little byproduct, kind of like plants create sugars, same idea, bacteria creating that instead. The mussels grow off of that. Other animals either graze the bacteria off the mussels or also eat the mussels themselves. The mussels are really, really large, not like a mussel you might see on your dining table at a restaurant. And they also smell like gas because they live near these cold seeps. But they are definitely animals that do eat them and live near with them. Anyway, very cool creature. One of many weird things that you'll find in the deep sea. Okay, so another piece of technology that we're using a lot to explore the deep sea are ROVs, which are remotely operated vehicles. This one is operated by Nautilus, which is the ship I showed you in the beginning, that they just do things for education. They have this really nice ROV that they drive around in the ocean. And they live stream all of the video that's coming off of that ROV, which is super cool because you can go watch it in real time. And I'll share all about that in a minute. But you can see this ROV is pretty large. It's about the size of a small car. And I'll show you, you can kind of see it's got a bunch of different things on it. It's got these robotic arms here, and it's got spots on it to hold samples, collect samples, a bunch of different things on it that make it a really useful piece of equipment for scientists. Here's Hercules again, another view. All ROVs have a name. This one's name is Hercules. You can see its robotic arms here folded up. Here's one, here's the other. There's propellers to drive it forward and backward and up and down in the water. This big yellow top part of it is actually a special kind of foam that helps make it neutrally buoyant in the water. So it just kind of floats just under the surface. And then they use the propellers to kind of push it down and then can bring it back up to the surface as well. And then I believe right here is a video camera. They're equipped with lots of different video cameras on them that can do 4K video. So you get a really good look at what's in the deep sea. If you'll notice, there's no room for people on an ROV. And that is one thing that ROVs can't do, is they cannot hold people. This is another ROV called ROV Sebastian. Same kind of idea. All of them look slightly different, have the same kind of components, these robotic arms, lights, cameras, that kind of thing on them, places to hold equipment. This is another one. This is on that ship that I showed you that I was on a couple of years ago. This is a small ROV. They also have a very, very large ROV on board that's like a couple of cars stacked together. Basically, it's very large. That's used to service oil rigs. This one was used for scientific research. So you can see it's got these are called Niskin bottles. They help us collect samples of water in the water column. And then these tubes up here help us collect mud samples off the bottom. Good question. How do people name ROVs? I don't know. I'm sure that maybe the whoever's purchased the ROV or owns it has probably decided to name it. Normally there's some creative naming around it, like Sebastian. This one is named the Global Explorer. They all have names. Maybe there'll be a contest one day where you can help name an ROV. I'm not really sure how they get their names though. That's a good question. Okay, so every ROV, they all have similar characteristics. They all have enough lights on them to light up a football field because the deep sea is dark. So we have to bring all our light with us to the deep sea. They have 4K high def video cameras and also the ability to take still images as well. They have robotic arms that help us pick up samples, deploy instrumentation on the bottom. Sometimes we'll bring down experiments to set up on the bottom and leave them there for a while and come back later. They have sample collection boxes, or like I showed you, those water bottles or other tubes that help us collect things off of the bottom. And then they don't hold people, and so they have to be connected to the ship in some way, usually by a very long cord and a tether that supplies power to the ROV and also connects it back to the ship. And the video signal from the ROV travels up that cable. So they have like fiber optic cabling. And that's another great advantage over submarines. ROVs don't need batteries, so they're powered by the ship, and they don't hold people. So you could drive an ROV on the bottom of the ocean for days and days and days if you wanted to, and you had the money to do that and the time, and the weather was cooperating. because the submarines don't have bathrooms, so eventually people have to come back up to the surface to use the bathroom. And having the power from the ship means that you're not limited by a battery. So that's a great tool for us to have to be able to explore the deep sea, is these ROVs. And they've only been around for 20, 30-ish years, maybe slightly longer than that, but the technology is improving all the time and we're using them more and more. There's nothing quite like going down to the deep sea and actually being on the bottom, but ROVs are pretty much the next best thing. And not to mention they're safer for the people on sea as well. You never know if something could go wrong in a submarine. And so the scientists are not in this ROV, they're on the ship, and they are, the ROVs are actually being driven by people on the ship. And so there's usually they call it a control van, a place like a room on the ship where everybody's watching these monitors that the video signal from the ROV is streaming right to these monitors through that fiber optic cable. And they can watch in real time what the ROV is doing. The pilots can see what they're doing and drive the ROV. And you can see here, over here, there's this video of the ROV arm actually taking a sample, so you can really see really well what you're doing. It's almost, the video cameras are so good on the ROVs that it's almost like having a microscope with you on the ROV, because they can zoom in and really get a really close-up look at what is going on at that particular point in time. The other awesome benefit to this is that all of that footage can get live streamed to the internet. So there are many research groups that are live streaming their ROV feeds to YouTube. So there's so much footage out there, and it's awesome to be able to see that in real time. The most fun to me is just hearing all the scientists react to what they're seeing, because it's not always boring, like, here is another la 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 blah blah blah. It's like, oh my gosh, look at that, that's so cool, I can't believe I've never seen that before. Like, that's often what it sounds like when you're listening to ROV feeds. And just, it's so much fun to listen to and to watch people, or just to watch what they're seeing for the first time, because you never know what they're going to see and what they might discover. There's always something new being discovered. So just a few, this is a tiny handful of things you might see while you're exploring the deep sea. This is not even going to do it justice. So I encourage you to go find some live ROV streams, which I will share at the end, so you can see all the cool stuff. So here are some deep sea corals and brittle stars and squat lobsters, which are these guys here. About half of our coral reefs are actually in the deep sea, and they are really beautiful and really unique looking, a lot different than what you might expect a coral to look like, not like the corals you see if you're out snorkeling or scuba diving. They're really beautiful colors. We're not really sure why, because again, there's no light in the deep sea, so they don't really need to be a color. And they're just like a little oasis of life down in the deep sea, where lots of animals live. These brittle stars curl up in them to help them catch food that's flowing by in the water. The squat lobsters kind of do the same thing. They're really, really cool. And just by the way, a coral is an animal, not a plant, even though it looks like a plant. Anyway, so there's one thing. Of course, you might see some octopus. That's probably my favorite thing that they see in the deep sea. This is an octopus that was actually really curious about the submarine Alvin and hopped on the arm of the Alvin while they were doing some sampling. I believe this octopus was sampled in the name of science, so I guess curiosity killed the octopus in this case, but oh well. Well, oops. I'm sure they learned a lot more about it after they collected it, but sometimes that happens. This is another octopus that is one of my favorites. It is the Dumbo Octopus, and it is the deepest living octopus on our planet. And it's called the Dumbo Octopus because it has these fins that it flaps that look like Dumbo the elephant. And if you love the Dumbo Octopus as much as I do, you can go to our website, and I will share that at the end. We have a 4-part video series that's a cartoon, so it's great for kids, kids of all ages, and adults too, but it's all about a Dumbo octopus and her friend Zach the human, and they explore the deep sea. So check that out. We just released the 4th video in the series last Friday. And these are some tubeworms. You might find these in places like the Gulf of Mexico where there's a cold sea. These are, again, a chemosynthetic creature, meaning they're relying on chemicals for energy instead of photosynthesis. And I will share a lot more about tubeworms, which are a very cool organism, on Wednesday, this Wednesday, 1 o'clock, when I talk about chemosynthesis. So if you're interested, please join me. Please sign up at the link. The link to all the webinars live on our website, ECOGIG.org. There is a post all about them on there. But if you can't find it, I'll try and throw the link to that in the chat here as well. And then these are another kind of worm. They're little. This picture makes them look really big, but they're probably about 1 inch long. They're known as a methane iceworm. So they're a kind of worm that actually lives in frozen methane gas that naturally bubbles out of the seafloor. And because it's so cold in the deep sea, the temperature is about the temperature of your refrigerator. And the pressure is so great, this gas actually forms this like spongy frozen mass on the bottom of the ocean. And these worms like to live in it. And there's actually bacteria that grow on the methane gas that is, again, a chemosynthetic bacteria. And the worms are actually grazing the bacteria off of the methane ice. So weird ecosystem. This was not discovered not that long ago, in the last 15 to 20 years. No one knew they existed before. Thanks to an ROV and its technology, we were able to first observe these guys and learn more about them. So very cool, very weird. One of my favorites. This is a Gulper Eel. There is a really great video that I didn't pull in here because I wasn't sure how video was going to work, but you guys go check out Gulper Eel and NOAA Ocean Explorer, because there is a really great video of the scientists reacting to the Gulper Eel. These guys can expand their jaws, but also there's all this extra skin that like billows out around their body, just in the mouth area of the eel. And they look a little ridiculous, but they do that to try and make themselves look bigger, and also to capture prey that's really large and fit in their mouths. So it's a very weird creature. And then this looks like a toy on the bottom of the ocean, but this is actually a stubby squid, and it is real. And Nautilus Live found this guy hanging out on the bottom not that long ago, a couple of years ago, I think, was one of the first times they observed it. And anyway, it's very cute. You can also Google this, Nautilus Live and Stubby Squid, and watch the scientist reaction to that too, because it's very entertaining as well. I see a question that what do Gulper eels eat? That is a good question. I am not sure exactly what they eat. I think that they're going to probably eat other fish and things that are living down in that part of the ocean with them. But that's a good question to ask Google, which we can do that later. If you have questions that I didn't answer, feel free to email me. My email is ecogigoutreach@gmail.com, and you can contact me that way, and I will get back to you with questions I didn't get to answer. Again, I showed you that brine pool. This is another brine pool in the Gulf of Mexico. So there are lakes on the bottom of the ocean. They're usually called brine pools. Sometimes you'll see like a brine waterfall where the water is flowing down the hill, down like a slope. which is also very cool, and also brine rivers. So the water can flow, it can sit in a pool. Anything that crawls into a brine pool is usually pickled right away because it's just so salty. It's just toxic water basically, but things live right on the edge of it. And every once in a while, there are animals that can like dip into the brine pool and then come back out. But if they like crawl in like a crab or whatnot, they are usually don't come back out. And then you also might see things like underwater volcanoes, which are also known as hydrothermal vents. So these are places where tectonic activity, like plate tectonics, happening in the deep sea. The plates might be hitting against each other, and water makes its way down through the cracks in the crust, gets superheated, and then flows back out. It's full of chemicals from this underneath the seafloor. So the water looks like smoke. That's why we sometimes we call these guys black smokers because they look like smoke, but it's not. It is hot, hot water coming out of these vents, and in the water is a bunch of chemicals that are kind of dissolved in the water because it's very hot. As it hits the cold seawater around it, the chemicals actually precipitate out or they fall out of the water, and they help build this vent structure up. And so these vents can be really, really, really tall. They can grow to be 100 feet tall or more, and be really, really wide. And they're also a actually very unique ecosystem for other animals that live in the deep sea. There are ecosystems that only live on hydrothermal, and hydrothermal vents can be kind of a short-lived um, ecosystem where you might have one form, and then because of the plate tectonics and the instability that happens there because of like underwater earthquakes and things, the next time you go look for this hydrothermal vent, it might be gone. So it's kind of a fast growing, unstable ecosystem, but very interesting. Again, I will talk more about these on Wednesday when I talk about chemosynthesis. So here's just a few links. If you miss these, if I'm going too fast, let me know. I will try and share them with you. You can always email me. But you can watch live footage of ROV camera streams. Right now, Schmidt Ocean Institute is currently exploring and live streaming. So you can visit their YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/SchmidtOcean, and you can watch their live stream. They've been having some weather issues right now where they can't deploy the ROV because the weather, it's a little rough out there right now, but they are doing some live events where you can get ship tours and even ask questions of the crew that are on the ship right now. They're doing that daily, if not a couple times a day. I know they just did one this morning. So tune into them. They have a great social media presence as well. They're on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook under Schmidt Ocean. So you can kind of tune in to what they're doing. They do some really, really awesome work. There's also Nautilus Live that I've talked about a few times now. They aren't diving yet. They will hopefully be starting back on expedition in June. But their website is a really great resource if you're looking for footage from previous dives. They do a really nice job of making educational video clips for people to look at that are fun and informative and short. They're also, they have a great social media presence as well and a great YouTube channel. So you can find them, but check their website first because that's kind of where everything lives. And then NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, they have an ocean exploration branch called Ocean Explorer. They are also not diving right now, but they have lots of great footage on their website from older expeditions. They have a ton of educational things if you're looking for something to do right now. They're a really, really great resource as well. They do a really good job of explaining a lot of their footage, they are right up there with Nautilus Live as far as how good they are at doing this. So those three, Schmidt Ocean, Nautilus, and NOAA Ocean Explorer, top-notch resources to check out more deep sea stuff. And then finally, please go check out our 4-part cartoon series, which is on our website. It's about Molly the Dumbo Octopus and Zach the Human, and they are an unlikely deep sea duo. They have lots of adventures in the deep sea. They'll teach you a little bit more about the deep sea. There's also some, all the videos are on our website, but also there's a learning guide for students and teachers to use as well. So please go check that out. And with that, I will say, does anybody have any more questions about what I've shown you? Or is there anything you want to know in general about the ocean? And if nothing else, please email me at ECOGIG.ORG@gmail.com. And I can answer your questions there. Or if there's any links that you need from today, I will share those with you as well. So let's see, questions coming in. Can erosion happen in the ocean? Definitely. There are things like landslides and things that happen in the ocean. There's obviously not like rain or anything like that can't erode anything in the ocean, but there are underwater landslides, earthquakes, all sorts of things. There are currents that are moving through the ocean and disrupting things, and all of that definitely. Second question here is, do they affect the ecosystem? For sure. There are ecosystems that are here one day and gone the next. Thanks to all of that. There's a lot of human activity. They're also impacting the ecosystem, but yeah, a lot of natural events do impact the ocean ecosystems for sure. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you everybody for tuning in. I hope you learned a little bit about the deep sea, and if nothing else, you got some great links to check out afterwards. And thank you for participating. And I will hopefully see some of you guys on Wednesday to talk about chemosynthesis. All right. Thank you so much. I'm going to end it here.